Good morning. Welcome to episode 103 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the construction, drilling, and water industry. I'm your host, Brock Yorty, and this week's episode is brought to you by Rig-O-Matic 76. How many times has this happened to you? You have a well to drill, you're trying to find a crew to drill that well. You know that you could hammer it, you could drill it, you could reverse it, or you could just wish for it, but you just don't have the staff to do it. But now you can use Drillco's amazing new drill, the Super Well-O-Matic 76. Yes, drillers, the days of troublesome staffing issues are over because the Super Drill-O-Matic 76 is the tool that lets you drill without getting muddy. Here's how it works. Download the app, click on the job site location, and send out the Super Drill-O-Matic 76. If the crew isn't on site, nothing can ever go wrong. April Fools, everybody. Yeah, I love Saturday Night Live and Dan Aykroyd's Bass-O-Matic 76, and I just had to do that. However, we're in luck. This week's newscast is actually brought to you by our equally funny and brilliant Canadian friends, Derek's. That's right, Derek McGladdery and team at Derek's Drills. Thank you for bringing us the news this week. Decades of experience and dedication to innovation have made Derek's one of Canada's fastest growing drilling rig manufacturers. The Imagineer behind the best domestic dual rotary drill rig now offers drills to meet every serious water well, geothermal, and RC exploration drillers' needs. Way better than the Drill-O-Matic 76. You could have an Arthur or a Matthew or one of their great dual tube rigs. Go check them out at derex.ca. This week in the news, we cover the EPA's announcement of a partnership with the Agency for International Development to advance environmental protection around the world. Next, we have breaking news from our Washington correspondent, JJ Smith, where he had some awesome discussions with both sides of the aisles on serious issues impacting our water infrastructure. This week's feature is a discussion with Daniel Yates, owner of Blue Collar Brands production company. It's going to be great to talk to Daniel and hear all the great things he's doing. Episode 103 is packed with content that we should not fool around with and just get right into learning. So let's jump into the news. For this week in the news, we start with the EPA. On March 26th, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael S. Regan and the U.S. Agency for International Development Administrator, that's the USAID Administrator Samantha Power, signed a memorandum of understanding that formalizes the leaders' joint commitment to cooperate in tackling the challenges of climate change, air and water pollution, lead poisoning, and recycling of materials from plastic and electronic waste, and encouraging the responsible management of critical minerals. The meeting occurred after Administrator Reagan's recent mission to Africa, where he reinforced EPA's commitment to partner with leaders, young people, and advocates to address many of the same challenges that we see every day in the United States. Here's the quote. EPA greatly values our long history of environmental cooperation with USAID. Then Administrator Reagan continues with, Administrator Power is a true champion for environmental protection across the world. Under her leadership, EPA is proud to work alongside USAID to work with developing countries to achieve high public health standards, strengthen environmental governance, and advance the values of environmental justice and equity. Globally, 1 in 3 children have elevated blood lead levels, and lead poisoning kills at least 1.6 million people each year, with vast majority of these deaths in low and middle income countries. Administrator power is advocating for a global drive to support low and middle income countries in rolling out and enforcing binding regulations to curtail lead in consumer goods like paint, spices, and cosmetics. In January, the USAID joined EPA in supporting the global partnership to eliminate lead paint. Administrator Reagan recently returned from Africa, where he met with national leaders, young people, and advocates to develop share solutions to environmental challenges, including air and water pollution, management of plastic waste, and electronic waste recycling. EPA will be working with the USAID to share appropriate US best practices in low and medium income countries. Another shared priority is the responsible and sustainable management of critical minerals. As the world transitions to green energy sources and we scale clean energy supply chains, demands for critical minerals that power these technologies could benefit millions through inclusive, sustainable economic growth, if mined responsibly. The EPA and the USAID are collaborating to advance strong standards and safeguards for sustainable mining of critical minerals around the world. This is big for us to be part of this, and we need to be sharing our knowledge. And this is a place, again, that we should not be fools. This is not April Fools. This is exactly what's driving our planet to be a better place for all, from low to middle income. We talk many things about the United States being a very protected area and many people wanting to come here. And this is exactly what it comes down to, us making a healthy environment for a freer, more equitable world. Let's jump right back into DC with our Washington correspondent, who had just gotten back from a water infrastructure discussion, a conference that covered PFAS. And this all comes from J.J. Smith. $650 billion is required to rebuild America's water infrastructure. Members of the U.S. Congress from both sides of the aisle who sit on environmental focused committees say they and other lawmakers are aware of the serious issues faced by water utilities, including aging and toxic infrastructures, the presence of contaminants, and the need for an estimated $650 billion over the next 20 years to deal with those and other problems. Legislators say there is no new funding plan. And this is a big deal because we have the federal infrastructure law. We have the Inflation Reduction Act. We have all of this money that's being pumped in that has to be utilized. And as we talk about toxic infrastructure, we have lead pipes. We saw what happened to Flint, though it was mitigated through the calcium buildup in that pipes. As that stripped away, that exposed it to a low income, underserved community that didn't speak up. And so as we look at 3M and their $10 billion settlement for PFAS, or we look at Dow and their $1 billion settlement so far, this is a big deal. And this is where it comes in. We have public law number 117-58, which allocated $55 billion to fund municipal and water utility projects ranging from water infrastructure replacement to the removal of contaminants from drinking water. We don't have the federal farm bill passed right now for point of entry to remove lead or PFAS, and this is a big deal. This funding is limited and scheduled to end after the federal fiscal year of 2026. Yet, JJ found out in this meeting that $650 billion is estimated to be needed to deal with those other water infrastructure projects. We have Representative Paul Tonko of New York, who told an assembled group of water utility officials at this conference that municipalities and water utilities are still benefiting from our infrastructure investment money. But here's his quote: We know that funding will not last. This goes on to the Association of the Metropolitan Water Agencies, Washington Conference is where this discussion had. He continues with this quote, but for now, I'm very pleased that state development funds are receiving more funding, thereby enabling states to distribute targeted funding to deal with some of the biggest challenges to water systems, including the replacing of lead pipes and complying with environmental protection agencies impending per and polyfluoroalkyl substances regulations. Remember, that's that 4 parts per trillion number that we're talking about that is really going to hit hard. We go on to a quote from Senator Shelley Moore of West Virginia, who states, a major investment and probably the largest federal investment we've had today is one that we're going to have here and now or in the near future. She continues, at the same time, there are concerns over the length of time it takes for federal infrastructure funds to be distributed when there is a finite line of 5 years to get this money out and used. She continues to state that the reason for slow disbursement of these funds, there are too many regulations piled on top of regulators. That includes new regulations on new areas of emphasis, like environmental justice requirements that either you haven't been measuring before or you don't know how to measure. Let's face it, West Virginia, you attack the EPA about air quality. You continue to ask for more PFAS funding. You are a April Fool's Day contradiction of our industry right now, from Parkersburg, West Virginia, and all the people that got sick that started the PFAS influx, to water quality issues, to wanting coal mines. Get it together. Yeah, the federal infrastructure money is what we need, but we also need appropriate regulations and permitting, and not just skipping and cutting through the red tape to get there. We don't have to be fools, though this newscast is coming out on April Fool's Day. I want you to think about this and go and read J.J. Smith's full article on where this $650 billion needs to be applied and where we're going to have to go next. Our water infrastructure is insanely important to the health and livelihood of our country. For our feature this week, I want to introduce you to Daniel Yates, owner of Blue Collar Brands, a production company focused on spotlighting good blue-collar companies that care about their employees. Why do we need to be shining the biggest spotlight possible on the drilling and construction world, the people who make civilization progress? I'll give you the employment numbers and you tell me. It's 161,262,000 Americans that work every day. There are 5,250,000 Americans seeking employment. Our unemployment rate right now is 3.9%, with 9 million open jobs available. That unemployment rate is at 3.9% because there's 6 million unemployed individuals. Average hourly wage is 27 to 28 bucks an hour. Average salary for a year, $59,428. Okay, so we're 161 million Americans working every day. How many are in the construction industry? 10%? 20%? What if I told you 5? Over 8 million individuals work in construction. Those individuals generate $2.1 trillion in revenue every year. And 20% of that 8 million are management, sales, business development, financial operations, HR, all overhead, right? No, we all have to progress this industry together, and we need all visionaries. And if you're thinking overhead, well, that's that dang safety guy. No, Safety individual, they're the ones keeping us safe, keeping us smart, ensuring that we go home every day and can play with our families with good hearing and a good back, good lungs, good eyesight. That's what we need. And we're a small workforce. Before the housing market crash, we were double that number. I want you to think back 10, 11 years ago when families were being laid off, losing their homes that were in the construction world. Now, think about those employees that are about to apply. They're 23, 24 years old, and they just watched 10 years previously mom and dad struggle to keep their home. Of course, there are plenty of jobs out there. And every time we see a new distribution center pop up so that you can have that product delivered in the same day, they're taking good individuals that should be operating equipment that are now operating forklifts. So we're going to jump into this discussion with Dan Yates, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. I want you to think right now, this is not an April Fool's joke. Hire Generation Z. Realize that they have 15 years of experience in technology before they even started working. They've been holding on to tablets and building things in Minecraft and being entrepreneurial for a decade and a half.
Yeah, thanks, Brock. So I'm Daniel. Basically, I work with good blue collar companies that care about their people and help them show off their people and what they do every day. Um, because basically, society doesn't see, value, or hear the stories of blue collar people. And so we have this growing workforce problem, and the goal is to attract and retain the right people for these companies that are doing something right. So we do that through photo, video, we create new websites, and then also help run social media for companies that we really mesh well with.
How did you get into this industry?
Yeah, so I had zero background in construction. I don't have an uncle in construction or anything like that. But I picked up a camera in high school and started a video production company shortly after. And a few years into that, I had a local civil company reach out to me, and they saw something that I had put out for another company and said, "Hey, we want something like this for our civil company." And I was just kind of puzzled. First off, I had no idea what a civil construction company was. Second off, I didn't know why a construction company needed a video. I was like, don't you just build stuff? Like, I guess I didn't realize the extent of what the blue collar world, if you will, actually does for society. And so I remember going out on the first job site that I ever visited, and they were building a massive subdivision, but everything prior to you know forms and concrete and all that, right? So all your underground utilities, all of your earthwork, all of your detention pond or retention ponds, all of that stuff, everything has to go underground and be just so that you can have a level foundation that's not going to just shift and crack, and have roads that aren't going to fall apart, and have running water and flushing toilets and electricity and all the things, and so I remember going out and seeing that, just being blown away by the scope of what has to happen just for homes to be built. I always thought, oh, you just find a spot, clear the brush, and put some concrete down, right? But there's so much more that goes into that, and I realized if I didn't understand that, just most of society also doesn't understand that, and so that blew me away. The second thing, obviously, the equipment is badass. You walk up to a big piece of yellow iron, and you can't not like kind of drop your jaw and be like, holy shit, this is really cool, But the third thing and the biggest thing is the people. And I think that as a society, we sometimes unintentionally, but we look down on people who do blue collar jobs, right, or dirty jobs, right? And I don't know where it comes from. Like, I didn't, my parents didn't teach me that. They didn't teach me, oh, like, don't spend time around blue collar people or people who work with their hands, But inherently there's this bias of like, oh, maybe they're not very smart, or maybe they didn't go to college, or maybe they ran out of options, maybe they spent some jail time. Like, there's all kinds of just, I would consider, bullshit notions about who's actually doing this work. And what I found was that couldn't, like, the stigma, stereotype, whatever you want to call it, couldn't be further from the truth. The people that I talk to, and I've been doing this for almost 5 years now, so I've talked to thousands of people in the construction world across the country, and 95% of them would give me the shirt off their back after 10 minutes of talking to them. And you don't find that in your office, you know? You don't. They're just by and large really good people doing really important and difficult work, so that society can function. So that's kind of how I got into it, and that's my why. I want to help those people feel seen, valued, and heard. And it just so happens to help good blue collar companies attract and retain the right people.
I couldn't agree more that we need to champion these people. We used to have shows like Dirty Jobs and Equipment Marvels, and then the equipment downturn happened, and we shift gears. And now we see it's back with the federal infrastructure bill and law and all these pieces. $2.1 trillion worth of revenue produced last year. Tell us about one great project or projects you've been on.
I really like mining jobs, so pretty cool always whenever I get to go into kind of a quarry or a mine and see what's going on. Um, as far as the coolest project that I've been on recently, I would say there's a mine in Indianapolis. It's right outside the city, like just right outside the city limits. And legitimately, you drive down the interstate, and if you were to accidentally slip off the road, you would fall into this pit. But nobody knows it's there. Nobody knows it's there. And it's this massive quarry, and that they're producing just a wild amount of tonnage every single year. Um, and actually they're rebuilding the highway right there, and they're using material from the quarry and just bringing it right up and putting it down as road base and using it on all of their all of the new infrastructure that they're building. But you wouldn't know that that's there unless you work there or you go on Google Maps and look at the satellite image. So I think that was very cool because of the location and the proximity to the actual infrastructure that it feeds. So being able to see that, I have a drone shot that I took where it goes over the construction project on the highway, and then it just opens up right out into the pit where all their material is coming from. And I think that's pretty cool. The projects are cool. The people, in my opinion, are cooler. So it's really hard for me to be like, I just really love this one, because everywhere I go, the people are really damn cool. And like, I spend about half the time I'm out there talking and getting to hear people's stories, because that's what matters the most to me. And I think that's what half of what I do is taking pictures and videos, but the other half is also just being there to like listen and learn people's stories so I can tell them better.
So you show up on this job site, you have all this gear and you're pulling it out and you're putting on your PPE. And let's face it, we are kind of a secret society. So you show up with this stuff. Sure, senior management knows you're coming, but now it's like, oh, is this somebody recording a safety incident? Is this environmental? What's happening? What are the reactions you get when people see you come out on site?
Yeah, so I mean, it's different with every job site. A lot of the companies that I work with are repeat, so a lot of the people I know, and actually it's cool because I get to see the same people 4 or 5 times a year even, and kind of actually build relationships with the individuals. But if it's a new job, new company, new people, whatever, sometimes there's kind of like a, hey, why, you could tell people are like, what's going on? Why is this guy here? But that's what I do, and what anybody can do to break the ice really is walk straight up, let them know why you're there. Say, hey, I'm just here to take some pictures and videos to show off what the hell it is you do every day. Because what you do is really, really important to society, and the people driving by have no clue that you're here doing it. And that's usually enough to break the ice so people understand, hey, this guy's not here to like show off what I'm, to snoop on what I'm doing, or to try and catch me in some angle to make it look like I'm doing something unsafe. Like, it really is just genuinely, I'm here to tell your story so that, at the end of the day, your wife and your kids or your sister or whoever it is can see what it is that you're out here busting your ass doing, because most people just don't know.
So speaking of telling the stories, but getting on site, What about site specifics to safety and all the aspects of you showing up and this equipment moving and whatnot? Tell me about what you've had to go through in order to operate safely on site, which is very important to us in our industry.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely didn't know because I didn't know about the industry. But I think the more I learned about obviously the OSHA rules and things like that, and obviously as a cameraman and somebody on site, I need to be watching out for those things. Um, Thankfully, usually not an issue, but I know enough now that if I see something, I can say something and be like, "Hey, I noticed this. This looks unsafe. Like, let's do something about it." As far as having some, it depends on the company. Some companies want somebody with me, just depends. Usually halfway through the day they're like, you're good, you know what you're doing, just obviously let me know if you need anything, and then I kind of run around. But it just depends on the company. And some companies I just text their general superintendent, hey, what jobs do you want me to go to this month, and then I just go show up. So it's kind of different everywhere you go.
Now that you're part of this industry and championing it, what would you say to a young individual coming into it?
I mean, as somebody personally who didn't love school, um, if I wasn't doing what I was doing now, I know exactly where I would be, because I see the fulfillment and I see the just the cool shit that a lot of people get to do every day. But then also being able to go home and say, yeah, I I built this stretch of road, or I you know drilled and blasted these materials so that people can go make concrete or go build computer chips or whatever it is, right? Like there's so many ways that you can actually make a difference in society through the construction world or through blue collar work, that it's very difficult, I think, to get a job in it and not be fulfilled. And if it's not for you, then it's not for you, and you'll know that. I don't think anybody should push themselves like, oh, I really need to go do this, because it's not for everybody. But there's a lot of people who I think would have a much happier life outside working with their hands than they would sitting at a desk inside next to a bunch of other people not talking. Just truly. And that's another added benefit I would say is the camaraderie. You go out, and it depends on the crew that you're working with, but most crews to stay together have to have a good, have to gel pretty well and have like a good camaraderie. And so you go out, and you would never see the closeness in a group of six guys or five guys on a pipe crew. You will never find that in probably any other application outside of the dirt world or the blue collar world, right? So just knowing that the people that you go to work with every day actually become your family, because you talk. You're not just sitting there sending emails back and forth. You're talking, you're communicating, you're cracking jokes, and there's not somebody over your shoulder like, hey, what if, you can't say that, or you can't do, you know what I mean? Like you're able to have the freedom to build these relationships and be a human and communicate with people. And I don't know. It's the right place for a lot of people who don't realize it.
It's so rewarding to be part of this industry. And right now, it's like we get to be the builder generation, like the greatest generation come back from World War II. And, we're building this country and this infrastructure and everything. And from making water come out of the ground to resources to putting up structures and horizontal drilling projects that are able to put in pipelines without requiring restoration. We're we're so surgical, like you're saying, driving down the road and not even realizing what's happening below our feet.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think that leads to another sidebar, like you talking about, doing a horizontal drill and being able to kind of come up with a process or use a process that's less invasive or less destructive. There are so many, if you're sitting back and you're thinking, well, I want to, construction sounds cool, but I don't want to kill trees. I don't want to do X, Y, Z. You know what I mean? Like, number one, if society continues to develop, somebody's going to do it. So it might as well be somebody who does it and is mindful, right? We need people who are mindful and thoughtful about the environment as they work. And most people are, because they work outside every day. They spend more time outside in the environment than you and I do, But there are so many jobs as far as environmental work. I was just talking to somebody the other day. They do all kinds of stream rehabilitation projects in Montana. There are, you talk about uh, like remediation work for, these large factories from the 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever, that did some things that were kind of sketchy, and now somebody's got to come in and fix those issues. These big Superfund sites, right? You've got, yeah, directional drilling where, you can drill and take. I was on a job, this was probably 4 years ago, where they did a mile or just under a mile of 40 or 50, I think a 54-inch water line pipe that they drilled and pulled under a river to avoid having to, dig and it was all through wetlands too. So they were able to avoid some areas that were like nesting habitats and things like that. So there's so much cool stuff, and it's not all, destructive, pushing dirt, peeling up the earth. Like, I could go on and on about that, but we need people to do that work too, and people who care.
Last question. You're young. I love this fact because in this industry, I've been being called the kid, and I just figured I was going from kid to old man, but you get to make me look middle aged, which is great. So, with all the time you have and your passion and just the storytelling you're doing, what do you want to do next? You want to go photograph a colony when we're off world? What are you going to do?
Um, I really like what I'm doing right now. I think the only thing I like the setup that I have. I have a 17-month-old and a wife, so I try to kind of keep it small. We've had an employee in the past, which was awesome, and it I think as of right now where I'm at, I like keeping it small and not being a manager because I can be flexible. But in the future, I want to be able to kind of not necessarily scale, but be able to offer to help more companies, because there's a certain cap that I hit sometimes where I'm like, I have a lot of work right now. This might be a couple months down the road before we can start this. And so having more capacity, so figuring out, I kind of have some ideas. I'm working on that right now, but probably just kind of grow what I'm doing right now. Um, Continue having these kinds of conversations and keep telling blue collar people's stories. That's the biggest thing, and helping companies understand how they can do that too. Because even if I can't come out and do it for you, I am happy to help you understand, the best ways to do it yourself. So
I love it. We have to get more of the youngest of the millennials and Gen Zs into this industry. Thank you for your time today. It's been a lot of fun having this discussion.
yeah, of course. Thank you, Brock. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you for joining us for episode 103 of the Driller Newscast. Check out thedriller.com for all the latest content that's releasing. Check out our social media. Go to LinkedIn. Check out Daniel Yates and all of the great stories he's telling. And industry, I know we've had the last couple of weeks some young professionals in here talking about influencing and telling stories and how we champion this industry. You're a fool if you're being a curmudgeon believing that they haven't already thought of the next best way to champion what they love and their passion. This generation wants to get dirty. They want to be out in this. I want you to think about Gen X. What did we do? We got to have plenty of time getting muddy, being outside, doing this crazy stuff. And us construction professionals that ended up going off to college, we did it because there wasn't a device in our hand to educate us, to give us knowledge, to teach us to become storytellers, to give us a voice. Going to college is important. Going to work and helping build our country or the world, saving the planet, fighting the global water crisis is important. But we have a generation right now that can find the answers, that can run the computers, that can tell the stories, that can run the equipment, that have a faster rate of learning and knowledge, and don't have to be in their late 30s before they're a productive piece, as we've continued to think we are in this industry. And this is a perfect example with Daniel. Same with our awesome editor-in-chief, Sammy, our publisher, Chelsea. We got a lot to do. Final piece, it's April Fool's Day. If you're operating unsafely, unsafe acts, unsafe conditions, you're a fool every day. So go out, be smart, be safe. Think about the individuals in the last couple of years that have been killed in trench collapses, electrocutions, falls, confined spaces, struck by, caught in between. Let's continue to have those tailgate talks, and we'll get back to a good safety moment next week. Be safe, everybody.